Hello everyone. This video will show you how to use the multimodal transcription conventions to transcribe embodied actions by a single participant. The first thing we want to do is set up our windows in a convenient location. I always use ELAN when I'm doing transcription, and I have a word processor alongside to do the actual transcription. I recommend that you first produce a fully fleshed out and completed Jeffersonian transcription of the talk and audible conduct and the timing of the interaction before you begin a multimodal transcript. And I also find it to be very handy to not do the line numbering at this stage, but only put in the line numbering when the multimodal transcript is complete. So I'll play the segment that we're going to be looking at now, and I'll show you the two embodied actions that we'll be transcribing.
I want to thank you very much for the use of your beautiful store. It's essentially a store, and that's great. So you know about the Trump store down the block? That's nice.
So those are the two that we're going to focus on in this video.
Store, it's essentially a store, and that's great. So you know about the Trump store down the block?
All right. So a first point about multimodal transcription is that it is not designed to be exhaustive. So when we're making a multimodal transcript, we're not trying to represent every embodied action, every bodily movement that we can see in the video. That would be practically impossible and analytically would not necessarily have the payoff that we might think it would. So what we do is we instead select particular embodied actions that are analytically relevant for whatever analysis we're developing. So this is just a demonstration. I don't have an analysis in mind, but I've picked these two embodied actions as the ones to transcribe: that point and this open palm gesture, which has been referred to as an accordion gesture by the media. Okay, so once we've identified the embodied actions that we want to transcribe, we need to make sure that we are comfortable using ELAN, and there's two keyboard shortcuts I highly recommend that you enable. If you go to View, and then you go to Shortcuts, and under the Annotation tab, if you go to Media Navigation, you want to be comfortable with the shortcut for play and pause and play selection. Both of those are really, really useful for doing multimodal transcription. And if you don't like what the shortcuts are on your computer, you can change them to something that is more convenient for you. Okay, so now if we look at the first gesture, what I'm doing is I'm holding down on the mouse and I'm scrubbing forward by clicking and dragging. And what I'm looking for is the very first frame at which the gesture becomes recognizable. And then once you start to see the gesture forming, you move backwards a bit. And for example, there, his hand is stationary. And so this is approximately the first frame where the gesture begins. Then we use the play selection button or the play selection shortcut on the keyboard.
Store.
So we see that he says store, but he hasn't quite finished that word store.
Store.
So this is where we're going to begin to transcribe the gesture that he produces. We're going to indicate its precise begin time, its start time. And he is saying the word store. It seems that he's in the middle of the vowel. So I'm going to put in a symbol there to represent the exact point at which this embodied action begins. So I've just used the plus symbol. You can use any special character or symbol that you like that isn't already part of the Jeffersonian transcription system. I personally often start with a plus sign because it's convenient, it's on the keyboard. And then the second one I go to is the asterisk because it's also on the keyboard. I can also use the plus minus sign, which is on the keyboard. If you want some inspiration for which symbols to use, just look at some publications in the area of multimodal CA. You'll see a lot of different people using different symbols. So we've got a symbol, and this symbol is going to represent all of the manual gestures that Trump produces in this video that we transcribe. So each symbol is specific to a multimodal resource and the participant that uses it. So plus in this transcript is going to be all of the manual gestures and manual actions that Trump produces. So now we make a new line, and we don't need to identify the speaker. So we could write Trump, and we would use lowercase to represent an embodied action versus speech. But because the identified speaker in the line above is Trump, it would be redundant to indicate this, so we don't need to. I'm just putting in a bunch of spaces. I always use spaces. I never use tabs. And then I put a corresponding symbol on the line below. So this is similar to the way overlap is transcribed in a CA transcript. So once we've identified the first frame at which the embodied action begins, we have a decision to make as to whether we want to represent the movement phases of the embodied action, transcribe its preparation, stroke, and retraction, for example, or whether we want to transcribe the embodied action as a whole, encompassing the entire gesture unit rather than each of its individual phases. So in this case, I'm just going to transcribe the entire gesture all in one go without decomposing it into phases. So we've identified the beginning time, and now we need to find the ending point. So we just scrub forward slowly, moving frame by holding down the mouse button and dragging. And then we're looking for the frame at which the hand goes to the rest position. So it's about there. Now we play selection again.
It's essentially a story. It's essentially a story.
So it's right around the end of store, and I'm just curious to see, is it actually at the ending or just a little bit before? So we can zoom in by using the slider down at the bottom, and we start to get a bit more detail, and we can listen again.
Essentially a story. Essentially a story. Essentially a story.
So I see that his hands go to a rest position a bit before the word is complete. So I'm going to put a plus symbol before the end of the word, entering a new line. And again, we don't have to indicate the speaker label because it is the same as in the line of speech above. And I'm going to put a plus sign there. So I've identified the beginning and the ending point of the embodied action very precisely. Now we want to put a description for this action into the transcript. And here you also have decisions to make. There are different ways to describe embodied action. You can use vernacular terms when those are applicable. You could use a term like point or reach. You could also use technical terms if those are relevant. So if this was an open palm gesture, it is a kind of an open palm gesture, we could include that. The key thing to remember is that you need a concise description, something very short to fit into the multimodal transcript. So don't write long descriptions. Keep in mind that this transcript is not meant to be a standalone object. It is part of an analysis that would be within a paper with text surrounding it, elaborating the concise descriptions that you put into it. So don't think that this needs to be a description that is fully intelligible without reference to the video, without reference to a screenshot, or without reference to the text you write to analyze the data. So you're giving a short description that is contextualized and elaborated by other parts of the analysis and transcript. So I'm going to call this an open palm gesture. Okay, so we've given it a description. Now this gesture continues from this line down to another line. So when this happens in multimodal transcriptions, we use an arrow. Just two dashes and a rightward facing bracket or pointing bracket. And what this says is that the action continues until we reach this symbol again. So it says, go find the next plus symbol. And the next plus symbol, we've already put it here, and we put an arrow at that next plus symbol. So that's a complete multimodal transcription of this gesture. All right, let's go and look at our next one.
And that's great. So you know about the Trump store down?
Okay, we're going to do the same procedure. We're going to look for the beginning point. Okay, going to back it up. I'm going to play the selection.
That's great. That's great. That's great.
Okay, so we hear him say that's great, but we don't hear the in-breath yet. I will put the symbol here. I'm going to use the same plus symbol because this is another gesture, manual action produced by the same participant. I don't need a speaker label because it's the same as the line above. And I'm going to put in some spaces and just put another one here. Now this time I will transcribe the phases. All right, so we're looking for where the preparation phase becomes a stroke phase. So we're going to go back until it reaches its top position. So there it's still moving upwards. And so we can say that around here is the end of the preparation. Okay, so the preparation continues until after so you. We're going to put in our marker here to indicate the boundary. And again, I'm going to put in the corresponding one. So for a preparation phase of a embodied action, we use a series of full stops. Now, in this case, the preparation phase extends down to another line. So we use an arrow indicating that this preparation phase of a manual action represented by the plus produced by Trump continues on until we find the next plus symbol. And now we're going to put an arrow here as well. And now we have a transcription of that phase. The next is the stroke phase. And we're going to encompass the hold as well. So there's the retraction. So we're going to go back to the hold. So this is the stroke and hold. You know about the... You can almost hear him starting to produce the T for Trump, but I'm going to put the boundary there after the. And now here I'll just put in the other side, but in the middle here we need to describe the gesture. And you could write something like points. And then we use a series of lines, dashes, to indicate that this description spans this entire space between the two plus signs. In Mondada's multimodal transcription conventions, there isn't a precisely different transcription convention for a stroke versus a hold, but this represents stroke and hold in the transcription of manual gestures. So now we need to transcribe the retraction. So we're scrubbing forward again, looking for the end of the retraction phase where it comes to a rest position. And we'll say here, there's a kind of a wobble and a bounce, but I'm not going to include that. So I'll say about here is the end of the retraction phase. Okay, so after down. And the retraction phase is represented by a series of commas. There. So now that is a complete transcription of his pointing gesture with the movement phases represented. I'll show you the formatting. If this was all that we were going to add to the transcript, we would then format the transcript correctly by putting the original Jeffersonian transcription lines in bold. And then we would put the multimodal transcription lines into a gray color to make a nice contrast between the two. All right. The final step, which I'm not going to show you, would be to number the lines. And when we're numbering the lines, we do not number the multimodal transcription lines. So we would put a line number for every line that is in bold here, but we would not put a line number for the lines that are represented here by light gray. I'll include a link to this file and a finished copy, the original and a finished copy, in the description below so that you can look at the finished product and you can have a go at this transcription yourself. So as always, I hope you find this video useful, and I will continue this series with a couple of more videos to come.